Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and today we are covering current Batman comic books by Ram V, the writer, and a ton of different artists that work on this Detective Comic series. We're not always going to go over every single artist on here. I'll let El Corazon bring that up. If you're wondering why we're not doing Arkham Asylum, part of our Grant Morrison coverage, because we had an emergency alteration for Chris Cloud, but that's okay. He'll be back. We'll reschedule Arkham Asylum again soon. Hopefully have my boy Dylan on again. He was supposed to come on for that. But at any rate, we're going to be talking about Ram V's Detectives Comics Saga, which I'm excited to talk about. And I can promise you, this will probably not be the first time, or excuse me, the last time we talk about it. But before I go any further, I want y'all to do me a huge favor and go please subscribe to the Comic Binge and hit those buttons like the like. Select the like button. Appreciate it if you haven't done that already. It's always really beneficial to do so. Select that button right there. Here, I see people watching already. Get on that, please. Please like the button. Please like the button. Yeah, please like the button. So yeah, if you're wondering what started us off today, I'll let the person describe that. Before I bring them on, I'll bring on the returning guest, I would say. Returning guest host, I guess, whatever you want. I don't know what you call him. But anyway, Carlos is back. Carlos, the King Crusader himself. What are we doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you, my friend?
I'm well. I almost asked you how what's your feelings on Edmonton in the Stanley Cup Finals, but I remember it's not Edmonton you're into. It's Calgary, right? You're a Calgary Flames guy.
Yeah, I am a Flames guy, which means I think I'm supposed to be predisposed to disliking the Oilers and cheering against them. But you know what? There's a few dynamics with that Florida team that I'm not down with. So it's all about the Alberta pride. So let's go Oilers.
You know, as my love of hockey grows, I know I'm supposed to hate Edmonton. And they've beat the crap out of the Kraken like 3 games this year. They just beat the snot out of us, and it's just like, I gotta tell you, man, that team is. I've always said they're sneaky good. Like I know they're supposed to be good. They have the best player on the planet, right? But they're even better than that. Like I've always said that. So it was cool to kind of have. I felt vindicated. They came into the Stanley Cup Finals, but yeah, it doesn't look good for them right now, being down 2-0. So I don't.
Yeah, I know they're in a tough spot for sure, and. The front ends, they probably have the edge, but man, that back end on Florida is pretty superior to Edmonton.
They're a good hitting team. Just one last hockey thing, and you're gonna appreciate this. I don't know many hockey players. I'm more of an NFL football guy. I'm a football guy all through and through. But there's a guy on the Edmonton Oilers that I think is the most badass name of all time, Evander Kane. How tough is that? You just walk into your room and go, I'm Evander Kane. Get the hell out of my way. I'd be like, by all means.
Well, he is tough.
That dude is a tough dude. He looks tough, but his name's even tougher. So if you put those two things together, I don't even want to look at the guy wrong. So, yeah, Evander Kane, maybe one of the best hockey names of all time, in my opinion, my short love of hockey. So anyway, enough about me. Glad to have you on. I can't wait to talk about these comic books in the series with you in a second. But before we do, let's bring the man on that decided to do this series in the first place. This whole show is El Corazon's own machinations, his own ideas. Javi?
Well, I mean, first I was vying for Batman '89 because it's the 35th anniversary this month. Very important movie in my fandom, and I'm like, there's a comic adaptation. I love this comic adaptation. It'll be perfect. Let's do this instead, because we had to pivot. Paul did not seem enthused, even when I'm showing them this gorgeous Jerry Ordway art.
Yeah, he's trying.
I was trying, but one of the many things that I've been wanting to revisit. And just I've been so busy with prepping for other shows and up to speed with Wally West and writing reviews for BOF. So I was like, all right, I've been wanting to get back to Ram V's Detective because I kind of dropped off reading it maybe 7 or 8 issues into it. and I just kind of fell behind and didn't go back. And I'm like, this feels like something that would read better in a trade or collected. And since this whole run started, I've had Paul is like the little angel on my shoulder saying how good it is. And then on the other shoulder has been Peter Vera telling me how awful it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just, my name's Paul and this is between y'all, and stay out of their conversations. But I've wanted to come back to it because I know at least the art was really good. And there were certain things that I just wasn't patient enough with or didn't understand. And I've been wanting to just sit down, put on the Batman soundtrack and read it in big chunks. And so I was like, well, wait a minute. This is like a perfect opportunity because I can kill two birds with one stone, get the reading I want to do for fun and do it for a show and talk about it with my friends. So when I mentioned it to Paul, he was all about it. And here we are with the first volume of Gotham Nocturne.
Now, here's the thing I want to say for the record. Because I do want to. I think it's a great introductory episode or kind of in the series, right? Because I want to cover this thing as a whole because there is a lot of layers to this ongoing saga that Ram's been working on. And I gotta tell you, like, as someone who I think I'll say off right off the bat, I'll get you guys all in here in a second, but I'm gonna riff on it just a quick minute if that's okay. I think Ram V is one of the best writers in comics. I think I feel like we've got a good, strong group of writers in the mainstream comics world right now. You have Phil Kennedy Johnson, who's fantastic. You've got Ram V. You've got Joshua Williamson. Just to name the three off the top of my head, I think they're killing it. We talked about Kelly Thompson. I think she's really good. Birds of Prey is fantastic. On Marvel side, you've got oh my gosh, guy writing Avengers and Moon Knight. Why am I forgetting his name? Jed McKay. Jed McKay is fantastic. There's no one and this is not a knock on these writers I love, but these aren't like Alan Moore, that kind of level. But the writers we've gotten right now are pretty damn good. Like they're pretty solid. And I think Ram V he fits perfectly in there because he has a very unique voice. And everything he writes, I tend to really I'm really into, kind of like Philip Kennedy Johnson, where I'm like, damn, like I like this. Like for instance, the Vigil, that miniseries that he did, that by all accounts should be something I think is complete dog crap. And Ram V's writing, and I'm like, okay, I'll give it a chance. And listen, I don't love everything every writer does. I'm just making that very clear. I read the first couple issues. I'm like, this is really good. Yep. Ram, did you read it, Carlos?
Yeah, I did. Like there was the shorts that were in, I think, Batman Urban Legends, and I was like, oh, these characters are cool, and I love the fact that you just have this South Asian team, and is just what they were. Like they didn't kind of plant a flag in it. It was just like,
that was narrative. Yeah,
exactly. United States have strike teams, and this is one from India, and so I was like, this is kind of cool. I'll give it a shot. And then I really liked the shorts, and I think there was a backup in one of the mainline Batman books as well. I was like, this is cool. And then I dove into the Vigil storyline, and it blew me away. Like the layers of the onion for that book were phenomenal.
And that's the thing with Ram that I'm always been overly impressed with, is that he's very detailed in what nothing's there. He doesn't put things out just for nothing. And people, I've seen people criticize that, and we'll get into that a little bit, I think, with some people we know and love. But to me, Ram V, that's a great example. The Vigil is like why that series shouldn't work, because characters who are unknown and not like I don't really care about at that time. I'm like, I shouldn't care about. But he really did a great job of writing those characters. And one day we might even do it for I might do a big like I did last year, a big Halloween month where I do a bunch of horror books. I discovered Ram on These Savage Shores, which is a chef's kiss, phenomenal book. And I could see the influences of or not influencers, but you see where what he's into. You see that there's similarities between that and this series actually with the family we get introduced. But anyway, that being said, these Savage Shores is fantastic. It's maybe one of my favorite independent comics in the last 10 years. I love it. And
amazing.
no, yeah, I'll make you read it and we'll get you on. I know you're buddies with Cookie. I'm going to make her read it too, I think, and come on there because she's a big horror fan. I'm like, she's coming on next week, actually. We're going to do Die, what I'm really excited about. Anyway, but yeah, like Ram V, and when he was tapped, and when him and Zdarsky both were announced to be on the Batman books together side by side, I'm like, this is like kind of like this is a big like leap, not leap, but a big moment for the Batman character and for the mainstream book, because I'm like, these are pretty up and coming, if not already pretty established writers coming on the series. So I'm gonna shut up, but I'm just gonna say I got really excited for Ram V to come on because I like Ram V already, and I read a little bit of a Swamp Thing, really like that. So I was primed and ready. So Carlos, do you know about Ram V at all before Detective? Because I know you're reading the book regularly, it sounds like.
Yeah, I was reading the book regularly, and I had been exposed to his writing. Like, I think Swamp Thing must have been my primary exposure to him, but he's written some other stuff in the DC space. I'm almost positive.
He has, yeah,
that I'd read as well that I quite enjoyed. So, yeah, kind of to pick up where you had left the football, like I loved.
Thank you.
I loved what Zdarsky had done on Daredevil, and it was like probably my favorite book at the time. And so to have him making the jump over to the DC side, I really loved the Night storyline that had started as the mini and came to have a lot more significance now with his book. And then with Rom, I was like, that's a perfect complement, because with Zdarsky, you're going to get something that leans a little bit more comic booky, for lack of a better term, that's going to be kind of high action, that's going to be playing on those nostalgia berries a bit, and riffing on things that and with Rom, like when they announced him coming on the book, and the first interview that I read with him, he talked about his storyline being an opera. So I had the benefit of coming into his detective run knowing that this is going to be something really layered and with a lot of nuance, and that I'm going to have to put some effort into reading and maybe give it some time to digest, type of thing. And I was pretty optimistic when it first started, and I quite liked where it was going, and I liked some of the concepts and things that he was playing with, because they're not things that were overly used. But it wasn't until like just life getting in the way and a few books stacking up, and I had the benefit of reading 3 or 4 issues in a single sitting, that I realized that like this guy is cooking. And honestly, this detective book, it's like a song by your favorite artist. Like, it comes out and you take it in the first time, and you form that immediate opinion, and you either think you like it or you don't like it, but you're going to revisit it. And every time you revisit it, I think it reveals itself a bit more. You see a bit more of the machinations behind, or when you hear a few of the more the machinations of the song. And with this book, that's exactly my experience. And honestly, like, I'm always happy to come hang out with you guys and talk comics. Like, I love it.
Hell
but
yeah,
like,
dude.
to have to revisit this book and reading it now with the benefit of being in the end game for his 30-issue Odyssey, knowing where it goes made reading this first trade so much richer. And man, I liked the book well enough when I first read it, but I loved it when I reread it in preparation for this podcast. Like, it was phenomenal. Like, I'm eternally grateful to you for not only having me on, but for getting me to reread it. Like, yeah, I had to stop myself from going further.
No, and we'll go further. I'm glad, because like Javi said, like, he kind of fell off and he wasn't vibing with it, and we're gonna get to him in a second about. But I just want to make sure I want to echo that really quick. Exactly 100%. Like I everyone who follows me on X, formerly Twitter or whatever, has heard me sing the praises of this series as it's come out. I've always said this is great. This is a fantastic saga, and I think Carlos, I think I remember even commenting on a couple things about that. Actually, now I think about it, so you know, it was funny because I, just like you, rereading these first 4 issues. I'm like, oh my god, it does make sense even more, and that's probably I would say the biggest criticism is that I would say of the series is of his saga. There is a lot going on, and there's a lot of new characters that get introduced, and you get kind of lost. But when you go back and read, and I don't think you get lost enough as you read it, because we both have read it and we both liked it. But like you said, like it just gets, when you read it monthly, it's hard to remember what's that guy's name again. Like that's the problem with that. But when you go back and you binge, like, and I'll tell more of my tale later. But these 4 issues we did, I was like, oh my god, oh yeah, this is fantastic. Like it's just like, it just reminds me like how good it is. So I'll let you have the final word, and I'll throw it to Javi.
Yeah, like, and to build like what you were saying, like when you go back and you revisit the things that they were building up, like I think one of the book's attributes, but also maybe something that worked to its detriment. There's a lot of things that happen that that are familiar in comics, right? Like there's a conflict between an arriving gang and an existing gang without giving anything away, right? And like, okay, we've seen that before, and like, Harvey Dent has the conflict between himself and the Two-Face personality. But when you see how purposely it's done in this book, and then where it leads and when it pays off, like there's a piece of mythology within kind of the Al Ghul timeline that they lay out, and I think it's the 2nd or 3rd issue of this storyline. But then when you see that mirrored with Bruce's journey, Bruce and Talia's journey, quite frankly, like, holy smokes, like he is writing and operating on a completely different level. And I think for us as comic readers, like people that have kind of criticized it and put it off to the side, you did yourself a disservice, because with not seeing the whole work and judging it as a whole, you just write it off as like, I've seen this, I know where this is going, like, Harvey will wrestle with Two-Face. But it's like, no, it's not even that. Like, it's just he's taken a trope from the Batman lore and he
expanded on it.
Yeah, it goes to a completely different place that I've never seen before. Like, it's I've read Batman comics for way longer than I care to admit, and it's all stuff I've never experienced before, which is not something that I say very often.
Before I throw it to you, Javi, there's one last thing I want to add. There's a Two-Face issue that's coming, like of the 4 issues we've read. There's a Two-Face issue that's not too far away from where we read from 1062 to 1065. I'm not sure what exactly happens, but it's very Two-Face oriented, and it's brilliant. And I've even posted it's a splash page of basically Two-Face and Harvey talking to each other in a monologue, and I believe it's just a splash page of just his face, and it's just like different captions like going between their conversation, and it's just like it's brilliant. I mean, the art's great, but you have to have a architect, which I think is Ram. I mean, I'm sure artists have a lot to say, but Ram is like you said, he's cooking. He's orchestrating all of this right here. So anyway, I got to get to Javi because I got to know what he thinks, because he was not super loving it at first. He read these 4 issues. Javi, go start with the beginning. Start with how you felt at the beginning and where you are now, and we'll go from there.
Well, way back in June of 1990, when I was 13 years old, there was Batman 452 by Peter Milligan and Kieran Dwyer. It was a 3-part Riddler story that they promised was unlike any Riddler story you had ever seen before. And it's
Keep
called Dark
talking.
Knight with a K and Dark Knight, Dark City. And
We
that,
reviewed it
like,
for the binge. Do you remember that?
yeah, that
Okay. You're like,
story blew my 13-year-old mind. I loved the art, and just how weird it was. And Thomas Jefferson was in a cult in Gotham, and there was this demon that they were trying to summon back in the Thomas Jefferson days called Barbatos, and that was what was driving the Riddler in the present day. And Batman had to slice the throat of a baby to save it and do a tracheotomy.
Yeah, I remember that cliffhanger
and
vividly.
and he was wrestling zombies in the grave, and there were these trippy Mike Mignola covers for all 3 issues, and that's the one. And it just left such an indelible impression on me at 13 years old. And like, my Batman fandom is all over the place because, like, my dad raised me on like the Silver Age stuff. I watched the Adam West TV show before the movie came out when I was 12. So, like, between Adam West and Super Friends and the Michael Keaton Batman and like the Red Rain trilogy, like, there's all these different ideas of what Batman is, and each one of them is valid. Each take is valid. So I don't have like, there are a lot of people that have like, this is my Batman, like this is their preference, be it solo or with Robin or with the Bat family. And I don't know, man. I just kind of take it all in stride because there's so much Batman out there that I don't mind. And if I don't like one story, there's going to be another one next month that I might, that might be my favorite thing. So, when we get to the era that we're talking about with Chris, with Knights Never Die, with the Morrison run, and as we start to get into that run and we start bringing up Dr. Hurt and Barbados again, and how that all ties in with everything, like, I was eating that up because I couldn't believe that he went back to this, to what I thought was an obscure story from my childhood, and made it like an integral part. And then that became part of Dark Knight's metal. And here we are to today with this storyline. And it's like, okay, you've got my interest with having Barbados being like this presence in these issues. And even before this series came out, like, the covers were just really intriguing. And of course we started off with like the last of the Lee Bermejo covers that he'd been doing variants for Detective. I think it was like weekly or bi-weekly. It was nuts. They had this whole storyline where Batman wasn't even really in it. But like, he finished his run on that, and then we started getting into the main book, and I was reading it, and I was kind of lost. Like, I liked the imagery. The art was beautiful. And I like Albuquerque a lot, but like, I don't know. Reading it on the screen, I was reading it, maybe it wasn't big enough, or I just was trying to get through stuff and didn't have the time. Something wasn't quite clicking with me. And then, like, it seems like Harvey knows that Bruce is Batman. And I'm like, I don't understand what's going on with that. Forgetting the fact, until Paul and I had a conversation yesterday, that Harvey does know. It was in Tomasi's run with Brad Walker. I had to go back and look at those again. I'd read them and I totally forgot that was a thing. So, but like I said earlier, like, I just got busy with all the other things, and like, I'm just going to get back to it, and I just never have. And so, I sat down yesterday, put the vinyl on, and just dove into it, and then it was over like really fast. And I wanted to, and it made me want to keep going, because I know there's a couple more issues before I stopped. And I stopped myself because I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself for this conversation. But I'm definitely more on board with it now than I was when it came out. And I'm like, really interested to see where we're going with this. Because it definitely read so much better collected. And this is only, like it said on the trade, this is only like the overture. We're just getting started. So that's kind of where that's, yeah. So I don't know how much. I mean, they're only a month behind. I have the DC Unlimited, so I mean, I'm just going to start plowing through it this month and see how far I get amid all the other stuff, because I'm trying to read some Brayfogle right now too.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, but
Well,
I'm digging it.
So you think it's probably, obviously, I think we all can attest to this. Of any kind of medium of art form you take, not only does the actual content matter, obviously, and that's no duh, but it does matter your environment. It does matter where you are mentally. Like all those things come into play whenever you're consuming any kind of art form, whether whatever it is, right? Movies, comics, music, whatever. Sometimes things hit differently when you just revisit them for whatever reason. Now, problem is,
well,
finding out.
Let me cut into that really quick too. The first time I read these issues was on. I mean, I read them on my iPad also this time, but I read them on my iPad at work, getting interrupted nonstop, and this is not a comic that you want to get interrupted on. Like, you need to get immersed in the storytelling and not be pulled out and then having to go back. And I think I did it a disservice by reading it in what spare downtime I have at work instead of at my house dedicating time to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting because to tell you my story with this, because Carlos kind of talked about it, how, and I'll throw it to you after I'm done, Carlos, but to piggyback up what you said earlier, you had said that you kind of like, you were reading it and you're enjoying it, but like, month to month, but then you kind of like lost track, things get busy. Yeah. As a comic fan, that's what happens to all of us, right? The pile starts going, like but it sounded like you kind of read a bunch at a time and you're like, yeah, like I'm vibing on this. Like that's what happened to me, because I was enjoying it. I wasn't like, this is the best thing ever in the world, but I was enjoying it. And then I got so far behind, and because I'm going to sound like I'm kissing up here, but I respect Ram V so much. I was like, I'm like, I think I read the first like 3 issues, like month to month, at first or something like that. And then I had like 6 months of it that I hadn't read in a while. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back and read it from the start, just because it keeps, because it's complex, So I sat down because I'm an idiot and I'm a whore for comics and showing people I read comics all the time on my social media. I posted pictures of me like reading Detective Comics again, and whatever. But seriously, I sat down and read like I think the first like 8 issues or something with the annual. I think Javi, Javi, you have the annual on here, and I was like, God damn, this thing's good. Like this is goddamn good, and I gotta tell you, it really redefined me. You know what? I can read this month to month, but it is something that, again, I love month to month comic books. This is a series that I think definitely reads better as a whole. Like, thanks for putting that out, the comment on there, Javi. Yeah, Javi, you have full control. Do whatever the hell you want. I appreciate that. But like, the thing is, it also is fun to read month to month to kind of know like where it's going narratively. Like not like not every detail, right, Carlos, but like it's also like fun. It's really fun to reread. That's the thing I kind of surprised me, was I've reread this, actually not even including this time, like 3 times, like going back like a bunch and being like, okay, I know what happened here, but I'm going to start back here again and read back. And I kind of, whenever I get far behind, or like a couple, like 3 or 4 issues behind, I'll go back an additional 4 or 5 issues to kind of get back into that world. And it helps so much go, oh yeah, this and that. And it's not like, I have to reread this. No, I'm looking forward to rereading it and going back. And the cool thing is, everyone, because it's such a long saga, like we're talking about, like, this is not just like a 12 issue. This is like going to be like 24 issues, like whatever. It's a long sucker. And I love it. And it's really refreshing to go back and really, really immerse myself in it. And like, God, it's just so great. There's Barbatos right there. So before I throw it back to you, Carlos, I just want to tell people, if you're kind of like, well, if you have to reread it, that kind of detracts from like the original like thing, right? Like who wants to reread something to enjoy it? Like there is a fair criticism with that. I want to make that very clear. Like I think that's a fair criticism. But I would say to like, count the slap back to, to that. I would say that what's so crazy is it actually is. I look forward to rereading it. Like it's not like oh, I have to reread it. No, I can't wait to reread all these issues again because it is so much layers, like you said, Carlos. So am I making sense to that? Like, because I look forward to rereading this to get back into everything.
Yeah, no, and it harkens back to kind of what I was saying. Like it's a book that's just operating in a different space, right? And it has enough that you think it's just a conventional comic book, but then when you, like you said, when you go back and you reread it, and or where you see where it ultimately takes the story, because we are in the end game now.
Yeah.
You appreciate it just so much more, and I think like the Gotham Nocturne it'll have vindication, because the reality is that the vast majority of comic book readers now read and trade, and with folks reading and trade, like this thing will thrive. And like us Wednesday Warriors, we're a dying breed, and like you kind of do that where you get your books and you read them right away and you consume them and you put them in the bags and into the boxes and you're on to the next ones, because like we talked about, the stack just is ever growing type of thing. But with the trade readers, I think there is a bit of a tendency to go back and revisit them or leave them on the coffee table and dive into some of your favorite parts. And I think that that's where this book will really shine. And like it's one of the all-time great sagas in the Batman main titles, in my opinion. And I think it's unique just in how long it is, but how long it is with a single concise story.
Exactly.
Yeah, like Snyder had great stuff, but it was all like you could chunk it off into like 6, 12, 18 issues type of thing. But this thing being like 24, 30 issues, but being one story. And it's like
not interrupted by like a cosmic event. It is a concise story.
Yeah, and I will tell you right now, like the stuff that's happening in the books that they just uploaded on DC Unlimited ties intimately into stories that Talia is telling in issue 3. Like, and it's beautiful. Like when you see the patterns that Rom weaves through this book, it's incredible stuff. And yeah, like I wouldn't recommend this as somebody's first Batman story, but I'd recommend it as absolutely one of the most interesting and one of the most fulfilling. And like the character work for Bruce, it like rarely if ever do we see stuff like this.
Great point. And that's stuff that Javi hasn't even gotten to. Like if the more recent stuff has been brilliant, I thought, and it's funny, Carlos, I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, why, for those who don't know, our good friends, Batman on, some of the guys on Batman on Film or Batman Book Club aren't big fans of this run. And that's good. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. It's crazy because I read like the latest Bruce stuff from a couple months ago. I won't, no spoilers here, but I'm like, this is brilliant. Like, I don't understand like why people don't like, some people don't like, I just think this is great. Like giving Bruce his own, a lot more of focus, like you said, less Batman, more Bruce centered from his mindset, having that. And that's why Barbados is so buried here, right? Like, and right off the bat, like no pun intended, dad joke. But no, but seriously though, like Barbados serves a purpose that we see even further down the line. It's brilliant. And Eric, really quick, and I want Carlos to kind of chime in on this too, and obviously you too, Javi. But since you haven't read as much, I think Carlos might have a little bit more of a say on this one.
Yeah,
I would say maybe, but I don't listen. This is just me as a pet peeve for in general. Like, I don't want to be a prude here, but like, I think it's overrated to be like, we're going to get ultra violent to get for ultra violence sake. Like, I don't really, if the violence is warranted, does that make any sense? Like, I don't. Yeah, sure, maybe, but when I read the story, it doesn't have to be R-rated or a maxi series or super dark and like not X-rated, but like ultra violent. I think, and like we talked about earlier, right, Carlos, in the confines of that box, there's a lot to be left to the imagination. And I think Rom, if you know Rom V's like stuff from like again, like from Vaults, like from These Savage Shores, very violent. Like he does a great job of balancing, like not going overboard. And I think that this is a great example of that. He does so much with so little that again, that's not like a knock. It's just he does a lot. He does very good with what he needs. And I'm sure the artists have a lot of say of the violence too, but I don't think it would be better if it was more violent and less restrictions from a censorship standpoint. Would you agree?
Yeah, one, there's a lot that happens, and there's a lot of brutality. There's some amorous moments as well that like you're not left wanting in that regard with any of the aspects of the book. But as far as a maxi series, if you were getting at this being something out of the mainline continuity, honestly, I'd be a hypocrite if I said yes, because one of my biggest pet peeves, and I think one of the things that's worked against weekly comic books, is that so often great stories are taken, and instead of putting them into the main book, they're put off on the side as mini series, and your mainline book suffers because
Yeah,
it's
that's a
left
great
to
point. Damn.
it's left to languish a bit, where if you had strong stories in there, you would get like a more consistent readership, instead of hoping that the people that are reading those books
We'll
would
go read
also
the
buy the
monthly
second
title.
book, as opposed to just trying to grow that reader base because it's consistently awesome, right? Like, um, yeah. So just to maintain consistency, I do like that this was in the mainline book, and um, maybe if they were more overt about this, but at the same time, I think they were, that this was going to be this big operatic odyssey. So yeah, I don't know what the
I mean,
proper
that's
answer for
their
that is.
announcement right there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there, it's crazy to me that Carlos, you honestly blew me away with that comment about how too many times that DC's, I think, more guilty of this than Marvel. I would say just me from an outsider perspective, you know. But Marvel is guilty of it too. But it feels like DC's really, I mean, with all their different Elseworld stuff, it's like, well, we gotta have this. We can't have this tie in here. It's a miniseries, you know. And you're right. Like, I never thought of it like that. They're trying to put this, this stuff out here. Like, well, this is cool. This is accessible. But go read the main series, even though we're not really confident in that we can't put it there. That's a good point. The more confidence you put into your main series, the more consistent that readership will get used to buying the book monthly. So when they do jump off, or the writers or artists would come off, they're already predisposed of buying it monthly and getting into that idea, which again is fun. I mean, it's fun to buy things monthly. Let's be real. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
But that's a brilliant point. I didn't think of that. And I think you could make this by itself, right? Easily. But it's actually, I mean, because to me, it's working to it's using the medium of monthly comic books to its advantage. You know what I mean? Like, that's, at least I think so anyway. So that's a brilliant point. Anything you want to follow up? I'll throw it to Javi.
Yeah, well, and I think
No,
they
I
get the best of both worlds too, right? Where you get the monthly
Yeah.
readership, but then, with things like this show and other outlets that will, like, it's too special a story to let die on the vine. Like,
Yeah.
it will find its readers, and I think it'll thrive in that graphic novel space and in the omnibus space and all that kind of stuff. And 12 issues, honestly, like, now that we're so far into the story, I don't think 12 issues would do this justice at all.
Not
Like,
even close.
they do warrant the runtime, and with how big the effect of the Oghims have on Gotham City, and just how deep they take it, and kind of the larger, like, the commentary that they have on Batman as a character, and if he is a positive force for Gotham City through this lens that maybe the villains, or they kind of flip it on its head with where the book is at right now. I don't think that you can do a story like that justice in 12 issues. So
Not close.
yeah, I do think that they need to let it run the way they did, and like we've kind of said, like we just have to let this thing simmer, right?
Yeah.
And it's really paying off, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Javi, go ahead, man.
No, I think, I mean, just echoing what you guys said, I think putting it on its own, it would probably just wither and die from like a sales perspective. As many like big titles that they have with big creators, like are they, I don't know what the numbers are, but it doesn't seem like a lot of people picked up the Knight like they would Batman. And typically Detective doesn't sell as well as Batman does. But I think, the having the series within the series thing works just fine. I mean, it has the brand name to help with the numbers and get people interested, and the covers that they have put out for this, both the standards and the variants, have been
fantastic.
They don't look like anything else that's on the stands right now.
This is
and
goddamn
they really just pop out. I mean, DC's been really good about honoring their variant covers and like making like floppies, like collecting them. They've got like a lot, I think it's called Uncovered. And like every couple of months, they'll put one out, be it Poison Ivy or Catwoman. Birds of Prey has one. And it's just like a comic where they make like a weird framing device so the character's talking to you. And in between that, like they'll show off some of the more recent variant covers just to give them another life again. And I would totally buy a book that was just these covers, even if I didn't like the story, which I'm really starting to enjoy it now. So, where we're at with it right now, like I'm so excited to keep going with it, and this feels like one of those things I'm going to want to have on my shelf in some fashion, which is key.
Very, very much so. And I just want to say this for the record. I have all these floppies and I haven't bought the trades yet because I'm waiting for like a more collected
deluxe.
Like World Saga Superman. Like I bought those trades and I gave them to my boy Dylan, who was supposed to be on today for the Arkham show. I gave it to him and said, "Hey, take these. I'm buying the World Saga, the big, nice, beautiful collection. And I'm glad I have that. I'm going to wait for a nice omnibus of this. I'm going to be buying it and it's going to be well worth it." And I even though I don't double dip usually too much with comics as far as like if I already have the floppies or whatever, but for this, like absolutely, it's too good and it's too big of a story not to have it all at once. So I don't have to go flip a million comics out. Right. Before we get out, I do want to talk a little bit about the story itself as far as just the characters they introduced, because I think that is very brave of what Rom did a little bit, to be honest, because, for those who don't know, he introduces a new kind of Ra's al Ghul-ish tied family. Carlos, you probably pronounce it better. I can't pronounce anything. What's this family called? Is it I call them the Orgums? What are they called?
Now you made me self-conscious of it. The Ograms is how
Ogram. Works for me. The Ograms. I like that. That's better than me. I can't pronounce anything. Never trust what I say. Trust me. But this story, the Ograms, they have been really fascinating for me, and I think like it's really enriched. I think the Ra's al Ghul and Talia and the League of Shadows. And, I could see where people would be, big Batman fans would be reticent to accept these things because Ra's al Ghul is a very particular type of story that you can't really, in my opinion, you can't go to a lot of because it's so specific. and it's
Mhm.
so out of Batman's world, that you have to be careful when you play in that world. Now, with the Ograms, I feel Rom's kind of Rom. I'm not sure. I apologize if people, but Ram V, he's kind of taking it literally home. Like he brought it to Gotham, right? And that whole concept is really fascinating and interesting, and tying that with Ra's al Ghul, it's like, in my opinion, Carlos, I think he's taking a big risk. And I kudos to DC for doing it. Do you echo? Am I making sense, or do you disagree? I'm curious.
Yeah, no, I get you. Where Roz was always that international threat. He was like, he's the sole member of the Rogues Gallery who's the international threat, and he kind of has a couple chords that he plays, and I don't find that they're overly inclined to play with that too much until recent years, where Damien literally and figuratively kind of kicks the door open and all that, right? So there's this really interesting blind spot for Batman where it's like, yeah, you kind of got this Gotham thing locked down, but there's this whole other aspect. And like, the thing I love about the League and about Roz is that he actually makes Bruce kind of seem small. And
mm-hmm.
and there's just this whole another level that he's operating on. And then they bring in the Ograms, and they're not only have history with Roz in a very ancient context, but they're intimately tied to Gotham. And actually, I was going to bring it up. Have you guys read Gates of Gotham?
Yes.
It was a Scott
Not in
Snyder
a while,
mini.
but I have.
So that ties right into this story. So Paul, you should give that one a read, because it fills in a bit of like the background with kind of the architecture pieces of Gotham and how it relates to Barbados and everything else. And so that, like, it's one of these where on our old show we used to call it the Winter Soldier effect, where like the Winter Soldier came out and it made the stuff that came before it way better in retrospect. And that's what Nocturne has done for Gates of Gotham, where it's like that was a cool story at the time, but it's even better now seeing it paid off in a context where Bruce is at the center of the story. So yeah, I thought that he did a really amazing job with introducing new characters, but tying them to the fundamental core of like kind of what's been established since the New 52 with Batman and Gotham's paradigm. So yeah, and like at first I didn't get it, but then once you do get it with kind of the Shabahad and the Amzer and how it affects the characters that it affects, and then how it's used as a tool for or against Gotham, like it's pretty amazing. But it took me a long time to wrap my head around all of it. And
agreed. Same.
And a lot of it, like, you don't appreciate it until you get further into the story. And yeah, I thought that they were a cool addition to the Batman lore. They made Gotham way more interesting. And probably for a decade, we've had people trying to build out that backstory of Gotham City with some of the similar notes that are here, but nobody's done it as well and as concisely as this. And it's made Gotham bigger and richer, I think, instead of just, it's the Waynes and the Cobblepots that set this place up. Well, that only gets so interesting, right?
Yeah. No, totally. And Javi, I'm curious. Before I throw it to you and ask you about the Ograms, and which, by the way, I fully approve the Ograms name pronunciation. I think that's great. It sounds very kind of Horse, the Ograms. I like that.
Well, actually, it's not even a spoiler for our book. Like, it's supposed to be like Arkham is supposed to be a rip on that name, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Arkham is like the anglicized version of their last name. So
it's amazing.
If that doesn't interest you to go pick up this trade, I don't know what will.
I yeah, and that's again going back to when you read this, the Ograms take a very unique, like their story gets way, I would say, a good way complex, and you're kind of not really sure what the hell's happening, and not in like confusing, but where the narrative is headed, you have no idea what's going on, and things definitely take some surprise twists. And to be honest, this is not, I would say it's a spoiler, but they dive into a little bit of Riles' history, which is really cool. And like, do you get some of that here? And that's the thing about it. I thought was really cool. And I would say also, without spoiling again very much, Carlos, I'm very curious what you think about this part. But
oh man,
that's gorgeous. That is just gorgeous.
I thought it was cool when I read it, but then reading it in context of where the story is now,
Yep.
it brought a tear to my eye rereading it, because it was just like you can't appreciate how wonderful, like this story that Paul has on the screen right now. It's essentially the better part of an issue, but you can't appreciate how wonderful it is until you get to the back half where you get that mirror, and it's so friggin' cool.
So, and what I was going to say was, you could argue, Carlos, that there's shades of like Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises. And those who don't know, I'm not the biggest Rises fan. I'll just say that. I won't say how or why, but I'm like, wait a minute. And then, but again, it's not, because listen, there's gonna be people are gonna rehash things in some ways, right? Like that's just regardless. But Ram does a great job of putting his own spin on things, and it's really interesting. And where it goes to is way different than anything else. But to that being said, if you're wondering, well, I don't know if I'd be into this. If you like the aspects of the Batman Begins Nolan trilogy of like the League of Assassins and Bane and all that stuff, 100% you're gonna be into this series. 100%, because he does a great job of bringing, I think, those cool things that the movies did. And even again, not, I wouldn't say he's using the movies as a template at all, but just if you like that stuff in those movies, you're going to be all about this series, because it feels it's in the spirit. That's what I'm trying to say. It's in the spirit of those movies more, I would say, than even the comic books. Again, I don't know as much Batman than you guys, but that's the way I read it as anyway. So, anything you want to say to that, Carlos?
Oh, you know what? Javi's got something hot on, but there is comic book stuff that does inform this, but we'll let
fair
Javi
enough.
take it away.
Javi, go ahead.
There's rehashing, which I kind of felt like maybe Rom and Zdarsky were doing at the beginning of their run. And then there's building upon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have gotten enough of these two respective writers' storylines to see that they're not just rehashing, or they're not simply rehashing. They're building upon what came before to add to this collective tapestry that is Batman. And like, for those who are reading Batman right now, like at least I feel like I'm starting to see what Zdarsky's been doing this whole time, because some of the beginning storylines felt very familiar, like Wade's JLA story and touching on the Zur-En-Arrh stuff that Morrison brought to the table. And it seems like there's a point, and like we all as people have history, like these characters have a history. Sometimes it gets thrown out the window, sometimes it gets brought back, but it's all building like this portrait of this man who has been tainted by tragedy and tried to rise above it all. And there's something kind of beautiful about the way Batman's determination plays into everything, and his inability to give up, and his willingness to go on and surpass the demons that are torturing him. And the Harvey Dent relationship is richer because they have all this history with each other. And we haven't really talked about at all, like, this isn't just Rom's story. There's a Cy Spurrier story. with Gordon that then, becomes Two-Face at the end of this volume. But this, I don't even know where this is going yet. Like eventually it kind of crosses paths with the main story. And it goes into volume 2. I know that much from what I've read. But there's like a character in this Gordon story that I have no idea what's coming with this. And I'm really interested to find out. But just seeing like, again, talking about like past history, like Gordon has been through so much between losing his son again and no longer being commissioner and kind of forced into being a PI with Bullock. And like, I love the backup stuff on this too. This time I read it differently. I read the ROM stuff in a cohesive piece, and then I went back and then read the Gordon backups as a whole story. And it was cool to see how those, like I said, come to a head. And I thought the art was really good. There's a lot for those 9-panel grid people. There's a lot of that in the Gordon story. If that's your jam. And it's just, showing the seedy underbelly of corruption and the police force still, and Gordon trying to find purpose because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's been chasing the Joker around the world, and now he's back home and he doesn't know what to do with himself.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, and like kind of what you were saying with Zdarsky and Rom coming into these books and building on the stuff that's gone before, I also feel like they've both done an admirable job, because DC with kind of the whole followed of
wipe
the
away the
5G.
continuity. Reconfigure it. Yeah.
We're gonna wipe it away, and then we're gonna bring it back, and then we're gonna do this 5G thing, and then we're not gonna do this 5G thing. And I think there's a lot of things that got left with the intent of some event cleaning it all up, or even like the Doomsday Clock, right? Like I expected us to get a bit of a cleaner reset coming out of that. And I think what both these gentlemen have done, and it's a testament to how strong of writers they are, is that they're like, let's just kind of write our own versions of a bit of an endgame Bruce Wayne story. So like they both had moments in this where it's like, and it's not even that Bruce gave up or was ended or failed or anything like that. It's just like they both had these poetic endings to his story as it has been, and then with this amazing new direction to grow the character in, right? And I think it's pretty admirable. Like, I think when these books are being assessed, like there has to be an appreciation for a bit of the odd spot that Batman was left in, ironically, of all the characters. Like Superman, they kind of took the best stuff that they had planted through Future State and Rebirth and everything else, and like that book, it's the best it's been in 20 years.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. And then, but Batman, it could have languished, but I think that people just don't quite appreciate how strong these books are right now.
Agreed.
Just because it came from something that we knew, but at the same time, like it technically was in a pretty awkward space when they left it, and the minis kind of hid that a bit, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point, because the minis were just killing it for so long, and and I mean, like Robin and Batman, is the imposter, like just great miniseries. I mean, the Jock one, the Dark Knight, where everything goes dark.
One Dark Knight.
One Dark Knight. Like, there are so many great miniseries that came out in the last couple of years. You're right. Like, it kind of covered up. And I know a lot of people listen. I like James Tynion, the fourth. Like, I like a lot of his stuff that I've read. I love his original detective run. I know he came back to Batman, and people were like, "I don't like this, man." I read Joker War. It was fine. I thought it was pretty decent. But a lot of people did not like it. That being said, you're right though, because then Joshua Williamson kind of came on, kind of like carried the torch for a minute, and then like bailed right out. But it felt like he was there to just kind of get DC their bearings underneath themselves, and then they gave it to Zdarsky and Ram. And I gotta tell you, like, as someone who's writing, I'm not writing, but as someone who appreciates and reads these main superhero comics, like Spider-Man, not been the most consistent, like, as the main continuity. Superman is when you put two main decent writers on a book and let them have, like, I'm assuming some creativity, like, as far as like a little freedom that way, you're seeing the benefits of, like, Philip Kennedy Johnson, Joshua Williamson, now Jason Aaron. I haven't got Jason Aaron stuff, so I don't know if it's good, but
Oh, it's so cool.
I'm sure he's a solid writer. I haven't really connected with a lot of his stuff besides maybe Thor, but but he's not been, I don't think he's terrible. So I'm really excited to see what he does Superman. But I mean, like, but still, you have two good writers, Williamson, Kennedy Johnson, then Kennedy, gave way to Jason Aaron. Jason Aaron now, like, another big solid writer. Go to Batman. Now Batman's got two good writers, not just some, let's just throw someone. No, you got Zdarsky, who's a very, very popular. Ram, very not quite as popular as Zdarsky, but he's building himself up, and you're seeing the benefits because maybe they're not blowing the top off of things, but they're definitely doing stuff, and they're allowed to do things like Joker Year One in Zdarsky's book. And again, like, I thank my boy Javi for giving this to me for Christmas, because my boy came through out of nowhere. I'm like, I put this on my wish list for in stock trades. It's free publicity in stock, and this showed up literally right before Christmas, and I was like, God damn, I was like, it was such a nice thing. It honestly touched me. I was like, I really wanted this too. I was like, oh, and I blew through this in 1 week. Like, I wanted, because I was like, okay, I want to read this. I love the artist a lot, and
yeah,
like, I just gotta tell you that, Carlos, you brought up the fact that, hey, Zdarsky's he's building off his own world, and that's like, that's kind of what Ram's doing here.
Yeah.
They're building off their own worlds, but you know what? Like, I prefer Ram to Zdarsky as far as the Batman stuff at this point, but at the same time, like you said, Zdarsky hasn't been bad. Like, I've been enjoying it, and like, and I actually enjoyed this probably more than his main series. I love this. I thought this was great. Yeah. Like,
that
I know
mini was special.
Yeah, I know people don't like Ghostmaker. I get it. Like, if you don't like Ghostmaker, you're really not gonna like this. But that being said, I knew where Ram was going with, or not Ram, but Zdarsky was going with it, and I bought it, and it does make I think a pretty good, like, main series when he ties this into his main series. But going back to this, and we'll wrap it up here in a little bit. Again, Carlos, thank you. If you have to bow out anytime, just let me know. But I just gotta say that, like, I do appreciate the fact that they're building off their worlds. And even though Ram may not have a miniseries like this that he went off of, that being said, there's so much content in this that he don't really need it, but there's so much layers to it. It makes it special in the Ograms and everything. Like, there is something special that both these writers are doing simultaneously. I can't believe I said that actually accurately somewhat. I'm proud of myself. The fact they're doing that together is really impressive. And I am with you, Carlos. And Javi, I think it sounds like you're in agreement too, that we're getting maybe a special time in Batman comics as far as mainstream comic, the main series, because I don't know a time, maybe, again, I'm not the biggest Batman guy. I like Batman a lot, but it feels like this might be the first time since maybe the 90s that, like, both series are maybe not like setting the world on fire, but they're pretty damn good, and they're pretty consistent, and those sales and everything have been pretty consistent too. It feels like that way anyway. And yeah, these two series are like, again, lighting the world on fire, but it feels like we're getting a time we're going to look back at and go, that was kind of special, because he had Zdarsky doing his stuff. He had some crazy fun stuff, and Ram's super huge saga that he'll be leaving after. He confirmed he's leaving after this Act 3 is done. So it feels like people need to embrace this because this has been for me. I've been loving this Batman era right now. And so Javi, I mean, you could comment on this and kind of wrap up your feelings on the Gotham Nocturne here, but it feels like we're in a special place for Batman mainstream, the main series anyway.
I mean, I think we're just in a special place with Batman all around.
Sure.
Like there was a lull for me after King left the main title. And we still had Tomasi doing detective, which give me Tomasi on Batman all day long. Give me Tomasi on Superman all day long. Give me him on GL all day long. Like the guy is amazing. But for me, like revisiting this, like I feel like everything is firing on all cylinders between Batman and detective and the Black Label stuff and the stuff that, you know, isn't Black Label, but are like miniseries, or the satellite titles like Catwoman. And Catwoman's really strong right now. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, with Selena having actual 9 lives and being kind of supernatural, but it's been a really fascinating ride. I need to dive into, that's my next thing, is I need to read Tom King's Penguin. But if Peter Vera's loving it, then I'm pretty sure I'm going to like it because he's the biggest Penguin guy I know. So it feels like across the board for me right now in this 85th year of this character, like there's so many different flavors of Batman that you can just give to someone and they're going to like something of it.
Yeah.
I'm just happy that I'm getting on board with this run and I can't wait, to keep going with it this week.
Dude, Javi, I know I'm gonna get your updates. Obviously, like I get your updates every day on everything else. I'm gonna get this for sure. But I think you're gonna love where it's headed, especially the last. I'd say like I haven't the last couple of issues, but like the last I'd say 4 or 5 months, especially like what Carlos has said. Like it gets special, and I think for someone who loves the Bruce dynamic and like, you know, his psyche and where he's at mentally as far as like his past and things like that, like it gets really special, I think. And Ram really does a great job of that. So I can't wait for you to get in this because I think it's great. And so, yeah. Anything else you want to wrap up before I go throw it to Carlos?
No, just the usual stuff. Find me on Batman-on-film.com. I've got a Brave and the Bold review that hit yesterday, or today's Tuesday, hit today. Yesterday, I got to host the official Batman podcast show where we talked Batman First Night. And of course, Up to Speed with Wally West. I just need to edit Flash Annual 1 episode and put that up. But last week, I did a review of this guy, the Todd McFarlane Gold Label Dawn of DC Wally West figure. So that is
very cool.
Finally putting content out there again. And yeah, man, and then Nights Never Die here on the Comic Binge.
Well, and plus other shows too,
and other shows.
You're on as much as me and Chris are now. So you're like I said, you're a permanent fixture. You've been institutionalized.
Well, thank you,
my friend.
I appreciate being here every time that I can.
You actually helped me out so much with this stuff recently. I've always super appreciate it. So
happy to do it, brother.
Appreciate it, man. You know I love you. Carlos, this has been fantastic. I know you asked me, but we reading more than this. I'm like, let's just take the 4 issues. That'll be enough with the 3 of us, I promise. But I'm really glad we got you on. Now, Javi was, I was thinking like, who could we get on the show? Like, he's like, what about Carlos? I'm like, duh, we've had him on the show before. I'm like, what the hell am I thinking? This is perfect. And I'm so glad that Javi reminded me to ask you. And I got to get you on again soon. You're great. Thank you for staying up late with us, man. I know it's late over there. Seriously, super appreciate it. Any final thoughts on the series and everything? Anything else you want to talk about real quick?
Honestly, man, it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm so happy that you asked me because revisiting these issues made me appreciate them all that much more. Damn. And with having the latest issues kind of fresh in my mind, I felt that I could have a great conversation with some great guys about this book because you could see you could see the machinations of what Rom's going for
Yeah.
with this Odyssey. Really is the only way to describe it. But yeah, as far as what's happening with the books, to kind of parrot Hobby a bit, like honestly, the two Batman books right now, more than anything, they are a celebration of comic books as a storytelling medium. Like
Yeah.
they're not just kind of putting out books for the sake of putting out books. They're both very purposeful and intentional in what they're trying to do, and in telling very layered and complex stories in the medium. And I've been reading comics for a really long time, and I read them across the spectrum, and I'll tell you right now that doesn't always happen, right? So
Nope.
I think we're seeing something cool, and there's lots of flavors of ice cream, and maybe the books aren't serving up your favorites right now, but as far as the artistic merit of what these two gents are doing, and particularly Rom with this book, like this is very singular in what it's offering, and yeah, it's one of a kind, and like kudos to Marie Javins for allowing this to happen with like their flagship character in one of his two mainline books. So yeah, if you love comic books, honestly, do yourself a favor and read this. Like, even if you're not the biggest Batman guy or whatever, it's just so cool, so unique, and I do think you have to have a bit of knowledge of the character and whatnot, but I don't think you need to know a ton of the continuity of things to kind of pick up with what Rom is doing. Like, he establishes what the paradigms are for each of our characters pretty quick, and sets the table within the first two issues as to where they're all at and whatnot. So yeah, I don't think it's for a beginner reader, but
It's not too far from beginner. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's too far off from a beginner reader, but yeah, if you're like the first time ever reading comics, really, or Batman comics, I'd say read a little bit more first. But like, I wouldn't say like you'd read like 800. You read a couple stories, then jump into this. I feel like you could do. But yeah, did you say who is the person heading up DC? Like, is it a lady? Is it Marie? Was that her? I think is that right?
Yeah, Marie Javins is the editor in chief.
I remember when she was announced, I was like, interesting, because she kind of came out of nowhere, I want to say, and she has 1000% like changed things, because it feels like creatively there's like Jeanette Kahn like level like stuff, right? Like things are creatively pretty badass right now, where I'm like, man, DC's killing it. And it makes me like, Marvel, what the hell are you doing? It's like, as a Marvel zombie, I'm like, it bums me out. I'm just raving about these DC books all the time. I'm like, I got the new Superman, Joshua Williamson, Volume 2. I'm ready to dive into. I got my Superman, Philip Kennedy Johnson books I'm about to jump into. I mean,
World's Finest.
World's Finest is fantastic. I mean, like, dude, and not only that, guys, but like, those compact comics they're coming out with, like like $8-10 for like the Watchmen and the Court of Owls. I was looking through all the next ones that are coming out. You've got the Far Spectre one with the Lady GL character I really wanted to get into, but I'm like, dude, yeah, that's gonna be a compact comic one for like $10. I'm like, hell yeah, I'll buy that, like, no problem. Like, and not to mention their new like epic line versions of the world's Finest, it's called, like with like the Batman Year 1 and 2 comprised together. I mean, like, and like they're coming out finally the Jim Shooter stuff from Legion of Superheroes is finally being reprinted. Like, guys, DC is killing it. Like, they understand. Oh, let's make things accessible for new readers. Oh, let's actually give people who want to buy trades like me, like, we don't have to make like 5 million copies of it. Let's do a small print run. We'll put these out like Marvel's Epic line, and people will eat it up. Yeah, I'm already planning on buying like 80% of it. And then anyway, I'm with you. DC is, I'm sure she's a good hand in this. She's killing it right now. So give her a raise, DC, and Marvel, take some notes. So it's been awesome. Carlos, super stoked that you know, and before we sign off, I'm just gonna say, I know you took a break for Twitter for a minute, and I was bummed. I wrote you. I was like, what the hell is Carlos? Like, I haven't seen like his. You know, I don't agree with everything you say. Obviously, you're very hard on MCU, very hard on the MCU.
No,
but
that's true.
But I was like, man, I haven't seen Carlos in a while, and I remember you posted something. I'm like, Carlos is back, and I was like, I'm glad to have you back, brother. And and I meant that. I meant what I said then, and I say it now. So don't do that again to me. I didn't like it. Do what you need to do, obviously. But I selfishly was very happy you were here. So anyway, thanks for everyone who's come on. Pizza Time's here. Yeah, I'm with you. I think they have gotten a little too comfortable. So, you know, maybe we'll see. Pizza Time, good to have you on. Go subscribe, all that stuff. Follow Cape Crusader. Carlos's, I'm not sure that your ex Twitter handle. I'm not sure if anyone else under that title.
Oh, that's the best spot to get a hold of me. And yeah, every once in a while you catch me on Vigilante 1939 doing box office stuff with my guys.
I love those episodes.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's a bit of an experiment, but if anything, it's been crazy fun to do. So
you are well spoken and intelligent to get by with almost anything, regardless of if you know anything about it or not. I have no idea what you know. So all I gotta say is you're fantastic, and it's worth listening to you talk about anything. So everyone, appreciate everyone going on doing this. Subscribe, like, all that crap. You know, but I had a blast. This is more for me to talk with my friends than anything, which I love. So anyway, Chris isn't here. Javi, why don't you take us out, my friend?
Read more comics.
I love it.